Welkom terug. Sonja Giese van DataDrive2030 kuier vanoggend saam met ons nog selfs spesifiek oor die Thrive by 5 indeks wat bevindings wys oor of kinders skoolgereed is by teen die ouderdom van 5 jaar. Welcome Sonja.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you on the show with us. Let's start with the Thrive by 5. It's a terrible word for an Afrikaans tongue. Thrive by 5 index. What does it measure and what is the significance?
So at the moment, we've got thousands, hundreds of thousands of children across the country writing their matric exams. And everybody knows about it. It's in the media. And in January, when the results come out, we'll all be watching it. We'll be looking at how the provinces performed. We'll be comparing how children this year do compared to children in previous years. And we'll really be looking at which children are thriving. And unfortunately, whether children even get to matric or how well they do in matric is not determined within the schooling system alone. A lot depends on the kinds of experiences they have in the first 5 years of life. And so what we were trying to do with the Thrive by 5 index is essentially try to create a matric equivalent. How are children doing as they start the schooling system? What percentage of children are able to do the basic tasks expected of a child their age?
What was the finding? What percentage of children are actually thriving?
So we found, we assessed over 5,000 young children, children aged 4 to 5 years, and each child spent an hour with an assessor. And what we found was that only 4 out of 10 children who are completing an early learning program in South Africa are actually thriving. And what this means is that they are able to do the learning tasks of a child their age and that they are physically on track in terms of their growth. And then we looked at a number of domains specifically within early learning, and we found that only 44% of children were on track. And we found massive differences between children coming from poorer households and from better off households. So 8 out of 10 children coming from a wealthy household were developmentally on track, compared to only 3 out of 10 children coming from poorer households. And these findings have enormous significance as children enter the schooling system and really do place poorer children at a massive disadvantage.
You're referring to the fact that there is a disadvantage once they get into the system. We all know that once you actually fall behind, you never really catch up in the schooling system. There's not really an opportunity for you to catch up unless there is some external help for you through that period. But kids that are stunted, the stunted development children, what does that refer to? Does that refer to someone who hasn't had that development at an early age, before the age of 5, that stimulation going into 5, or what does that refer to?
So when we assess children, as I said, we spent about an hour with every child, and we looked at 3 areas of development. So we looked at the children's learning, we looked at their social and emotional functioning, and we looked at their physical growth. Now, the term stunting is a technical term which refers to children who are short for their age. Now, it's a very crude measure of a child's healthy development, but it's the only measure that one can really do at a scale like this in the kind of survey we did. So what you do is you measure the child's height, and then you compare that against the World Health Organization expected height for a child of that age. And we look at it down to the child's actual date of birth. And so children who are stunted, usually stunting is the sign that there's been malnutrition in their early years. And unfortunately, when children are malnourished, it not only affects their physical development, but it also affects their cognitive development. And so we found, for example, that a 4-year-old child who showed signs of chronic malnutrition was on average a whole 6 months behind their peers who weren't stunted. Now, by the age of 4 years, being 6 months behind is very significant.
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. This is interesting that you did this study, Sonja, because we always hear, they do these studies in grade 9 or grade 4, whatever it is, and we look at mathematics and they look at the languages, and we get these reports that South Africa is so far behind when it comes to academics in comparison to the rest of the world, or we're doing so poorly or whatnot. Could it maybe be that the problem lies that even before children enter school, they're already behind?
Absolutely. There's so much evidence to show that investing in children's early development pays off in the long run, not just in terms of their, whether they can read by grade 3 or whether they pass matric or even get to matric, but even whether they're going to be likely to get a job, whether they're going to be able to generate income. There's a lot of strong evidence to show that investing early really, really matters. And that's why we wanted to measure this. We wanted to measure what matters most and to put this on the national agenda and to ensure that we're regularly tracking this so that we can hold ourselves accountable as a country for improving child outcomes as children start school. And if we do that, we will see a knock-on effect through the schooling system.
Is there an indication in the index as to the factors why children are stunted before they reach the age of 5? Is it mostly parents who are not aware or not empowered with the right techniques and insight? Is it mostly socio-economical?
So there are a number of factors that contribute. There's a wonderful framework called the Nurturing Care Framework, which is developed by the World Health Organization. It speaks about all the critical pieces of the puzzle that young children need in their early years. So it includes a nurturing home environment, so how children are treated within their home environment, whether they feel safe, whether they get enough food and stimulation. And it also looks at whether children have access to a high quality early learning program. So all children should have, for at least 2 years before they start school, they should have access to a group learning program like a preschool or an ECD center that really focuses on building those foundational blocks for learning. So things like early literacy skills, early numeracy skills, problem solving, fine motor coordination, and all of those things, when children thrive in those areas, then they are ready when they come into the foundation phase of school.
Ja, so daar wys jy, kleuterskool is belangrik. Graad 0 is nogal 'n ding. Jou kind moet gaan. Sonja, we're going to talk to you a little bit later after the break, and then we'll pick up with the story. Maar eers advertensiebreek en kom ons weer terug. Welkom terug. Ons gesels met Sonja Giese van DataDrive2030 en ons gesels spesifiek oor die Thrive to 5 index wat bepaal of kinders skoolgereed is teen die ouderdom van 5. Sonja, we refer to the fact that the percentages of children that are stunted before they reach the school age. What is the implication for preschool then? And what should we do in South Africa to fix the situation?
So I'm assuming when you say stunted, you're not just referring to their physical growth, right? I think
Yes.
you're referring to their overall development. So,
Yes.
so that's why we talk about whether children thrive by 5. So our study only looked at children who enrolled in early learning programs. We weren't able to assess children in their home environments. And so I think that's one of the important things to note, is that the situation for children who are not accessing an early learning program is probably a lot worse. Less of those children are likely to be on track. So the first thing we need to do is we need to ensure that every child in South Africa has access to a high quality early learning program. And then we need to make sure that those early learning programs are delivering the kind of interventions that are likely to lead to good child outcomes. So we're able to use this data, for example, to look at the curriculum, to look at the materials, to look at the way practitioners are trained and supported. We also have data on the characteristics of the early learning programs that children attend. So we know what kinds of characteristics lead to better child outcomes. We're able to now provide much more focused recommendations around the kinds of things that early learning programs can do to improve child outcomes.
Wow. Sonja, I have to be honest, the picture you're painting is a little bit gloom if we look at preschool children, and especially now that you say you only looked at children that actually attend any form of education prior to going to primary school, and that is not even the majority of South African kids maybe that's sitting at home. So that picture is quite gloom to me, to be honest. What responsibility does the government have, if any, to fix this? Or, if we look at all the findings that you find?
I want to start with your comment around it being about doom and gloom. I think it's a wake-up call. It definitely is a wake-up call for us, but there is good news too. So what we're finding is that there are children in poor households who are actually really thriving. And that gives us some idea into the kinds of circumstances that we need to create for other children. And so we are able to harness some insights around that. And then everybody has a role to play. It's absolutely critical. So the data was collected, it was very well timed because it coincided with the handover of responsibility for early childhood development from the Department of Social Development to the Department of Basic Education. And that happened in April. And so what this does is it provides the Department of Basic Education with a baseline. So when the baton for early childhood was handed to them, what was the state of the situation? What was the percentage of children who were able to do things in each domain? And now the department can use that to inform their strategies, and they are doing that. This partnership, the Thrive by 5 Index was a partnership, and the Department of Basic Education is the lead government department in this and are very involved. So they're using it to inform their programs, their quality assurance systems, to look at their scorecards and what they measure. And also, I think it's really important to say that this isn't just about government. So a lot of what happens in the first 5 years of life happens in children's homes and communities. And also the vast majority of early learning programs are delivered by NGOs and largely women who are social entrepreneurs. And we need to support them. We need to back them so that they can do their jobs as well as possible.
You think the system is geared towards that? If you think of all the nursery schools in informal settlements that are being run informally and not part of the official system?
Yeah, that is a big challenge. We need to make sure that everyone who's delivering an early learning program is brought into the system. And so one of the things we're doing is to help government to understand what are the minimum requirements that an early learning program needs to meet in order to be considered registered as a program. So some of the registration requirements at the moment are too onerous for these providers of services in informal areas. They can't get the zoning, for example, they can't meet the infrastructure requirements. But we know that those things actually don't make a difference in terms of child outcomes. So we need to focus on the things that really drive improved child outcomes and try to ensure that everyone who's delivering services is brought into the system and provided with the support that they need.
Is there a possibility that you guys will track these children throughout their schooling career eventually to see where they started at and how they finish?
That would be amazing. This Thrive by 5 Index is just one study among many that we're involved in. So while we aren't able to track these 5,000 children, other people who are using our data tools are tracking children. So they'll be following groups of children. They started already, looked at them before grade R. They'll be looking at them in grade R and then all the way up to grade 6 to be able to see what early childhood factors are predictive of improved outcomes. And in the Thrive by 5 Index itself, we aim to repeat every 3 years. So we've got our baseline from 2021. In 2024, we'll connect the next round of data. And there we're also hoping to look at the children who are not enrolled in early learning programs, which is really important. And then we hope to repeat the data collection every 3 years so that we can track these trends as a country.
Absolutely. It's very important that we get a constant trend, as you refer to it. Thank you very much, Sonja, for joining us this morning and sharing the index with us, the Thrive by 5 Index, and the insights that we gain through that. Thank you very much. This is Sonja Giese van DataDrive2030.